Amitabh Chaudhry joins us, Managing Director and CEO of HDFC Life. Amitabh, morning, always good to connect with you. This is Nikunj from the Mumbai studio. Amitabh, is it true that HDFC Life is considering an IPO now that there is no clarity? We've not heard from the regulator. You've not heard from the regulator in terms of the proposed merger.
So it's very difficult to react to unconfirmed news and start deciding on what we'll do henceforth based on that. So yes, I mean there have been media reports on the fact that AG has returned the file to ID and asked them to take a call. We have always said that there are two alternatives before us. One is that we continue to look for alternate structures and see from a timing and execution perspective whether it will work or not and whether it will pass muster with how ID is thinking the Insurance Act works. And second is, if you recall that in May of 2016 we had decided to do an IPO and then this bill came through and we postponed our IPO. And that's the second alternative. Has a decision been taken to drop this deal and move towards an IPO? That is completely false because we don't have any official confirmation. So to do that would be very unfair. But those two alternatives do exist if AG has returned the file to ID or in the process of returning the file to ID.
But the IPO also is a long drawn process. It takes weeks and months of planning before you do an IPO. So yes. If one works with the assumption that merger will be cleared in next 2 or 3 months, then there is no need for IPO. But if you're planning an IPO, looks like you feel that the merger is not going to be cleared anytime soon.
So let's just understand the timelines of both the processes. IPO process, if you look at ICICI Pru as an example, yes, you're absolutely right, would take at least 5 to 6 months. You please understand, realize that we had done some work on the IPO, so we have some head start, but obviously it was then a year back. So IPO process will take 5 to 6 months as a minimum. On the other side, the merger process, is longer in the sense that, yes, you could get some of our approvals faster, but, it involves 3 regulators and you need to go to NCLT and then get that approval and get the merger done. So merger, even from this point on, could easily take 12 to 15 months. So it's not that, the IPO process will take even longer than the merger process. Some of the approvals in the merger process would come earlier. And as I said, both alternatives are open at this point in time because we don't have any official confirmation.
Maybe clarity, Mr. Chaudhry, Tanveer also joining into the discussion on which way you want to go?
Oh, well, we will take that call when we get a better clarity, official clarity from the regulator in terms of what the final thought process is. But, there is, we have waited to get this merger structure through for the longest period of time. And we have to evaluate if an alternate structure will take as much time and whether it will pass muster or not. And yes, IPO is a definite possibility and we can't keep waiting forever to just get the merger through. So, we might just, as an alternative, decide to do the IPO first and look at the merger later or otherwise we have to both move on our separate ways. We can't keep waiting for the merger for the longest period of time to come through. That would be very unfair to our shareholders also.
If I try to, read in between lines, and that's what journalists do, we look at every word and every comma and every sentence. I mean, you're making a case that the merger is not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, there was this rumor in the market 2 weeks ago when the stock went up that the merger was around the corner, but looks like the merger is not going to happen anytime soon.
No, let me clarify again. Merger, even when we announced it in August of last year, at that time also we had anticipated it will take 15 months for us to close the merger. That is part of the public announcement. Now, if you look at where we are today, because of the delay which happened, because of issues raised in the structure, we are at least 6 to 8 months behind. Because since November, nothing much has happened on the structure. We got the letter from IRD in November which said that under Section 35, the current structure which is envisaged is not acceptable. So if you kind of just work backwards, from August onwards, we can cut maybe 3 or 4 months in that merger timeline. So it's not that the merger timeline has changed. Even from today, we believe it will take that much time. And by the way, if you go to an alternate structure, then in the 4-month advantage, that also goes away. So we almost have to start afresh. And if I start counting afresh from this point on to close the merger, not agree on the merger, to close the merger end to end, where will emerge as a single entity, it will take 15 months at a minimum, which was part of the original announcement to start with. So no, I'm not changing any timelines here. It is something which both the parties have always talked about that they are committed to. But, coming up with the alternate structure is not going to be easy. The reason why we came with that structure because that was the most optimum structure. So both parties do want to close the merger. There is the intention. But at the same time, this has got delayed so much that we have to look at all the alternatives on the table and decide accordingly, which we'll do once we get a formal communication from the regulator.
Mr. Chaudhry, firstly, thank you for being so candid. If we look at the structure, since you talked about that, the three-stage deal had envisaged that Max Life was to merge with Max Financial Services, which would then in turn merge with HDFC Life. The design was such that HDFC Life would automatically get listed since MFS is already a listed entity. If you go with an IPO now, how will the deal be structured?
Well, it will be very unfair to start talking about alternate structures like this. Obviously everyone has to first agree before we, announce it to the media or whatever. But there are alternate structures, and as we have stated earlier, that the biggest grouse which the regulator had was that as you mentioned in your, the steps in the structure, that Max Life was merging with Max FS, which is what they had a problem with. So whatever structure we design has to ensure that only two insurance companies are merging. It cannot have any other alternate. Because otherwise we'll run foul of the objection which IRDA had raised. So, we are thinking about it. But again, as I said, we have to be clear, and both the entities have to be clear that what is the timing on each of these alternatives, what are some of the issues and risks involved in each of these alternatives, and are there alternate path level which will meet objectives on both the sides. And by the way, an IPO might also still meet their objectives. So, we are working through various alternatives. We have not decided as yet, and we can't say anything more at this stage unless the shareholders on both the sides